All right, hey everyone. I'm gonna try making a video here. Not sure how it's gonna go. I read an article yesterday, and I don't read a lot of mainstream media articles. It's a CTV news thing, and ended up being a bit of an exercise in critical thinking unintentionally. So I thought I might record this and walk through my thought process on reading this article, trying to decipher truth from this, because hopefully most of us are looking to find the truth. And it's hard to get that directly and clearly from mainstream media. So I'll walk through this and see if this is helpful. Most places you look, they try and tell you what to think. Hopefully, this is just an example of how to think. Here's how you can think about this stuff and what to watch for when you're looking at mainstream media articles. Any articles, mainstream or not. Okay, let's see what we can do. Get started here. All right, here's the article. It's from yesterday, June 4th. Here's how effective COVID-19 vaccines have been in Alberta. Okay. So, first off, be aware that you're being implied in the title that it is effective. So, no problem with that. They have to write something there, but it sets in your head already that it is effective. Okay, fair enough. That probably is. Okay. Some generalized stuff here, new numbers, just showing how effective. Again, just introduction stuff here. This is an interesting statement here. The numbers show those most at risk from COVID are either unvaccinated or diagnosed within 2 weeks of getting a shot, before the vaccine has had time to build up immunity within the body. Okay, fair enough, makes sense. And I'm expecting to see some charts and graphs here to show how effective this is in a minute. And a general statement from Chief Medical Officer. It's clear that vaccines are remarkably effective. Okay. And they can expect the number of hospitalizations and deaths to decrease as the population is more protected by first and second doses. And here's one more statement here. The province's daily new cases, active cases, hospitalizations, and deaths have fallen in recent weeks due to a combination of public health restrictions and rising vaccination rates. Okay, let's sit there for a minute. So basically, they're taking credit for this decline in cases and hospitalizations, okay? Interestingly here, they don't actually make a connection. Like, they're just saying, we did this. If you really want to prove this, or demonstrate at least with some credibility, you kind of want to connect this to something you did and say, okay, well, we introduced vaccines and it caused this. Look, the chart changed, the graph changed when we did that. Or we introduced lockdowns or masks and sort of show the correlation to the cases on your graph here. That's a concept we should talk about for a second. You probably all heard of correlation and causation, and it often comes up in debates and conversations, mostly in the context that correlation does not necessarily equal causation. Two things that appear to have a connection may not necessarily, one does not necessarily cause the other, okay? In this case, they're kind of indirectly making that claim. They're asking you to believe anyways that the vaccines are doing this. They don't even really demonstrate a correlation, but they're asking you to believe causation. It's they're doing this. Couple questions come to my mind here. It's the health restrictions and vaccination rates that are helping this curve come down and improve the situation. What about back here? If you can see this mouse, I'm assuming you still can. We had the same kind of thing here, and we had no vaccines for this. There was no vaccines back in December when the curve started to drop at that point. So what's the difference? Do we need the vaccines this time, but we didn't then? And I guess the question would be also, what was responsible for this curve dropping? Are you going to take credit for that in some way? Was it some measures, lockdowns, masks, etc.? If you think it was, well, then what caused the increase, I would say. So basically, they don't show any connection here between when measures were implemented and the effect that they had on cases. What they should do is say, oh, hey, look, we implemented lockdowns here, and look at the graph, cases went down. Or, look, we started vaccinating here, and the cases went down. Look at the graph. There, that shows it. But no, really all they're saying is, well, look, the cases are going down now, and we're doing that. So that's us. Trust us. Next thing. I found this quite interesting. Okay, this is actually quite compelling right about here. And I read through this the first time, and I'm genuinely looking for truth. What is the best thing for me, my friends, family, to do to be safest, right? And, of course, wider society. So this looks pretty compelling. I read this. and I'll read it out loud. You can read it on the screen, but if you can't, if it's too small or whatever, those who were unvaccinated or diagnosed within 2 weeks of getting a first dose represented 96% of cases. That's COVID cases, obviously, 93.4% of hospitalized cases, and 88.4% of deaths. Wow. Okay, I read this. So, in other words, those who had all these badness were either unvaccinated or recently vaccinated. So, those people in these two categories account for 96% of the cases of COVID. Wow. Okay, this sounds dire. This sounds like, man, you better get your vaccine quickly, right? As I sit back and look at this, I think, is there anything missing from this? Yes, complete context is missing. There's absolutely no context here. How many people were actually vaccinated to compare this to? Let's say I told you that in 2020, almost 100% of all COVID cases were from unvaccinated people. Would that surprise you? I hope not. There was no vaccine back then. So pretty much everybody was unvaccinated who got it. Okay, so then you got to find out what's the actual situation here. How many people actually had the vaccine to even make this a meaningful statistic? Well, I looked into that. Here's a statistic, a page I found. It's also CBC publicly available statistics, right? So there's more here. This is like breakdowns by age and stuff, but this is the percentage of Albertans vaccinated against COVID. You'll notice some stuff here. Oh, okay, so the period of this test was what? Since January till now, basically like last Thursday or so, like end of May, so 5 months, okay? Oh, okay, so really, vaccine started basically January. If you can see the small print here, basically starting maybe a hair before January. So very few people vaccinated for the first 3 months, frankly. End of January, we're looking at about 2% of the entire population was vaccinated. End of February, we're about 3% vaccinated. End of March, oh, we're getting busy here now. It's starting to go up here. End of March, we're at about 12-13%. Okay, well, that's interesting, and it sheds a bit of a light on this page, right? So for the first 3 months, less than 13% of the population even had the vaccine. So it's not really that surprising that a large number of people were unvaccinated or just recently vaccinated. So that, okay, it's a bit more perspective when you're, in my head, I actually probably subconsciously was thinking, well, maybe there was like a 50-50 split or something, like maybe half vaccinated, half not. And if that's the case, well, these are serious. Man, you better get on that. But it's not the case. For the first 3 months, less than 13% even had the vaccine. Let's go ahead. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting up to end of April. Still less than 30% of the population. So we're now 4 months into their data set, and still less than a third of the people even have the vaccine. Huh. Okay, so only recently, basically 1st of June-ish, they're half, just about half after 5 months. So this statistic here sounds really scary at first, but then you realize you're comparing a small percentage. Like for the vast majority of this whole period, a minority of people, a small minority actually had the vaccine. So that's maybe less serious than it looks. But here's another thing you can do when you're seeing articles like this, okay? Look for what the article says and what does it say by inference or indirectly, okay? Sometimes you can't do this. In this case, I think you can. 96% of cases of COVID were people that were unvaccinated or recently vaccinated less than 2 weeks ago. That means 4% of cases were vaccinated, right? That's basically a whole subset right there. You were, you weren't, or you just had it. Okay. Also, that means 12% of deaths were people who had been vaccinated. Well, that's interesting. This is meant to be like a comforting number that if you get your vaccine, you're less likely to die. You probably are. No dispute. I'm just saying. I don't think it's as comforting as I first thought it was. I look at this and say, okay, more than one person in every 10 COVID deaths is actually somebody who was vaccinated. It's 12%. And that's considering up until a month ago, Less than a third of the population of the province even had the vaccine, and still 12% of the people who died from COVID were vaccinated. Huh, that's interesting. I'm not a mathematician. If anybody is, obviously there's a big graph here with area under the curve, and probably Pythagoras is in here somewhere, but this isn't as comforting as I think it should be when 12% of the people who died from COVID had been vaccinated, and a pretty small minority until about a month ago were vaccinated. They still accounted for quite a lot. Now, let's go back. Draw your own conclusions. I'm not telling you what to do. I don't doubt that it's effective, but I don't think it's as effective as this looks like at first glance. If you go to your water cooler at work and say, oh man, look at this. Wait a second. How many people even had the vaccine? If one person had it and they died, well, that's 100% of death. Anyway, moving on. Okay. Something curious happens here. I don't know why they do this, or if it's on purpose, or I'm not saying anybody's deliberately whatever, but they combine these two categories of people: unvaccinated and recently vaccinated. Are those the same thing? That is radically different. That's completely different. Why can you not break this down? This article is missing extremely important information. I don't know if I can possibly imagine. If you're trying to get people, and they are, trying to get people to take a vaccine, you know there are people out there on both ends of the spectrum, pro, against, fanatical, who say this vaccine's going to kill you, and you lump these two together. Let's suppose it was like this. Let's suppose this 88% of deaths, and let's say we actually break this down. Let's say I'll break it down for you. Let's say 85% of these deaths were unvaccinated people, and only 3% were actually the ones that just had the vaccine a couple weeks ago. Well, that's pretty serious. You better get that vaccine there. That's significant. But let's say it's the other way. You're trying to convince somebody who thinks the vaccine is going to kill you. 85% of these deaths, if they tell you the breakdown on these two, 85% of them actually just got their vaccine less than 2 weeks ago and they died. Say that again. If 85% of the people who died from COVID got their vaccine less than 2 weeks before, and only 3% of the people who died from COVID actually weren't vaccinated, that's a huge difference. This is important missing information. Seriously, it's probably closer to 50-50, but who knows? They don't tell you. Like, come on, if I told you, well, yeah, 83% were either this or this, flip a coin. No, don't flip a coin. If 85% of people who died just got the vaccine 2 weeks ago or less, you don't want that vaccine. So you want to convince somebody, make this clear. Come on, man. Okay, I think I'm running out of stuff to say. Another thing that I noticed, this correlation versus causation thing, right? Let's go back to this chart. You can make it bigger. Let's go here. It is a flourish chart. That's great. There's the flourish. Okay, so this is just blown up, right? So do you ever wonder what happened here? Like, we were on a roll, right? I pretty much called this curve, as in the flu season curve, back in like October, and it happened. This, however, surprised me. This increase again. We were on a roll. Did we not remember this thing? We're all doing well. I think we even opened up a little bit. What happened? I didn't give this much thought. I don't follow the news a lot. I'm not really pro or anti anything. I am pro common sense. I am pro what the heck is going on. What the heck is going on? So, anyways, what happened here? I figured it must be a variant or something, right? I'm not into this every day. It sucks your life out of your brain, so don't do it. But anyways, what happened here? So I'm reading this, and I see this chart here. March. Okay, that's early March. That's funny. This curve looks familiar to me. What about this? This vaccine curve. We started vaccinating people pretty seriously. It was slow pace. February, 2%. Oh, March. We ramped it up big time. Well, that's an interesting curve. Look at that. Huh. And the more we pick this curve up, that's curious. So almost exactly, we started shooting people in the arm. It was a little earlier, right? We started probably, I didn't notice this even like literally till now, right? But doing this thing, I thought, oh, that's funny. What happened in March that triggered this? Was it a variant? Who knows? Maybe it was. But around here, this is when we started, right? Slow, March, boom, pick up the pace, shooting off like crazy. That looks remarkably like this. And you know what? If we pretend that I'm stupid and don't know how graphs work, I might see a correlation here. right? Like, this is the rate of cases, daily cases going up. This is vaccines going up at what looks to an uninformed observer like a similar pace. So there you go. I'm not saying do this, don't do that. I'm saying media is hard to get information from. And you can read stuff and it's fluff. It's hard to get fact. It may be there even, but if you take this and go to work the next day, or if you're in Zoom calls or whatever, tell all your friends, you're absorbing this into your worldview. If you don't think about what you're seeing, you're going to start telling people you have a 96% chance of getting COVID if you don't get vaccinated or something like that. Really though, hang on. Is that really what this says? Without the full picture, it's just not there. So just be careful what you read, and hopefully, I don't know, this is just an example of what I see when I see this stuff. I don't know, I don't like having to read stuff in so much depth that, like, okay, wait, oh man, that's serious, and then there's something missing there. And then how about this? Well, that's an interesting curve right there. What happened? You're saying correlation is not causation. We didn't claim credit for this, but your vaccines actually started back here. Your vaccine started January, February, picked it up. Well, you're responsible for this. That's good if that's true, but you started back here right before the worst curve, really, since the beginning. Maybe that was a worse spike. I don't know. But anyway, this I find essentially it's not a very good article at best. I don't know, like it's got some stuff, some charts are good. The charts, if this is accurate, I mean, what can you do? You use the data you have. All that to say, that is how I read articles, and that's why I don't really love mainstream media. I don't really buy what she's saying. It's incomplete, and then it kind of disturbs me that people will base important decisions on essentially a lack of information. And it's one thing to be told what to do or what to think. Hopefully you can see this and think, how do I think about this? How do I evaluate this? Is this true? Am I seeing? Here's a couple tips, right? When you see things, there's things they saying directly and other things say indirectly. So in this case, if 96% of cases were unvaccinated or recently vaccinated, well, that means 4% of people actually had their vaccine who got COVID. And what's the context? How many people actually had vaccines, period? You have to look somewhere else to even find that out. Wow, very few people. So if you told me this statistic right here in February, I'd say I don't want that thing in a million years. Only 2% of the whole population even had the vaccine, and they're responsible for like 1 in 10 of the deaths. Anyway, it's all numbers. I'm not a mathematician. Someone's probably going to figure this out and do the whole area of tangent pi r squared and something and figure that out. But I'm not totally convinced by this. So as you can tell. Anyway, have fun. Talk to you later.